Hello, welcome to the Deep Thought. My name's Hasib, and before we get into our usual topic of the day, I would like to make a little announcement on this little book called A Year of Questions, a quest for people to uncover who they are. It's a little book that is based around asking questions about you as an individual and who you really are. It goes through different things like your likes and dislikes, as well as many other facets of yourself as an individual. Fantastic little book. If you can pick it up on Amazon or on a Kindle right now, it's up and out there. And yeah, that's it. So let's get into our topic for the day. And today, I personally would like to talk about the concept of change, or the idea of change. And before we really dive into change and what it means and all these things, we have to define the point that we're trying to make here today. And the point here today that I'm trying to make is that change is not a bad thing, and that change is not something to resist. It is something that is always happening and will always happen, whether you realize it as an individual or not. So let's get into it. So when you think about change, you typically think about the true definition of the term change. And most of the time when we think about change, we think about things that are in our environment, our immediate environment. We think about things that are related to the politics around us as well, and we also think about religion in a way when we think about change. So, in a short few words, change, in my own perspective, could be defined as a shift in a way of thinking, or in a way of thought or perspective in relation to things and belief. So anytime you decide as an individual to change your beliefs of, religion or politics or whatever it might be, that is change. And that's a very simple definition of it, because there are things that are constantly changing all the time, everywhere, at every moment. You can't really define the term itself. It's just something that's happening all the time. So there we actually get to the when of the idea of change. When it happens, the truth to that question would be all the time. Now, where change happens is everywhere. It's happening all the time, like I mentioned, and it happens all over the place. So it's happening with you right now as you're watching this video, because you're absorbing a certain type of information, and your brain is processing that, and you're never going to be the same person you were before you actually watch this video. So, going from there, I want to talk about also how change really impacts us as an individual, and we'll dive deeper into how change actually impacts us as a society and different cultures, how different cultures change through essentially change within their own structures. So, how does change impact us? As an individual and personally, change impacts us in a very beautiful way, because it allows the process of growth to occur within an individual, within the human mind. It helps actually expand the perspective of human beings as well, because whenever you think about change, you can look at it from the perspective that it is always going to open up your view to a new thing that will ultimately allow you to understand things a little bit better. So, we took politics earlier. That's a perfect example. Whenever we think about change in a political sense, let's take the presidential elections that are coming up right now. We typically think about, oh, well, if we get a Democratic president, it's going to shift the country into a more socialist type of structure rather than a more capitalistic and, from my perspective, honestly, a little more communistic type of rule, a tyrannical rule. But you see, whoever gets elected to become president here within the next couple of years, whenever that change happens, a large change is going to happen to the country and the social structure of the entire country itself. And because of that, some people are afraid of change. Some people don't really like change, and sometimes that makes them feel like they need to hide or try to keep from that change happening. Now, there's a very important note there that I just mentioned, and it is fear. It's that sometimes whenever people get scared from the changes that are happening within the world or in their environment around them, they typically try to stop it from actually happening. They try to oppress it. They try to make it feel as if it's almost not real. All the while, it's still going on around them. And fear is very important to note here in the concept of change, because whenever we are in fear, we do not necessarily appreciate or even accept the concept of change. Anything in any form, in any capacity, we don't want change, especially if we're coming from a fearful place. In the political roles that we see every day and every few years here in the United States, people are scared of the new presidents. So let's take Donald Trump, for example, here. The Republicans on some sides absolutely adore the guy. There are also Republicans that do not actually appreciate what he's done or anything like that. All the while, Donald Trump, the man himself, is a representation of a certain change that is happening in the world. And a lot of people are afraid. People are fearful of his actions, of the things that he's doing, and that's perfectly normal. Now, people are afraid that within this new election here within the United States, coming up in 2020, people are afraid that if a Democrat gets a nomination and gets elected as president, that the country will eventually become a socialist state, and everything that they hold dear to themselves, everything that they've built up in their own mind of the concept of what the country of the world should look like in their own mind, is going to crumble right in front of their eyes. And that's just not true. That's coming from a place of fear, because everybody is set in their own ways, just a little bit. So fear can literally stop people from wanting change. It will literally cripple the human mind in such a way that they will detest change, and that they will never look to a different concept or look at any other concept as a proper form of life, or as something that could be embraced or even experimented with. We'll take politics here again, because it's a very simple subject to actually play with. Here in America, we live in a republic, in a democratic republic, and people are afraid that, if a Democrat actually gets nominated here in the 2020 election, that it will become a socialist country. And that's a very real fear. Just like everybody has a very real fear that, if a Republican gets elected again or something along those lines, that the country will go down a tyrannical dictatorship type ordeal. And those are both very real fears that come from the changes that happen in the country. But you see here, because we're also afraid of the changes that the other side brings, we actually stop ourselves from even acknowledging the other side as human, and we see them as a threat. We see them as something that's terrible, something that will ultimately harm us, not just on an individual scale, but on a mass scale as well. And this is not true, because whenever change is happening, it's a flow. It's a type of flow that will always change. It will always shift in one direction or another. Another thing is that whenever you think about change, whenever you think about in politics especially, whenever you vilify the other side because of the changes that they want to make, and because those changes don't necessarily align with your own personal beliefs of what you want to do, you vilify them, and then you completely ignore everything that they have to say. In a way, this narrows our perspective, and we have tunnel vision. We develop tunnel vision because we essentially don't want to look at everything that somebody brings to the table, and instead we want to just take a look at the one thing that makes us detest their idea. And because of this actually makes us avoid making contact with other people, especially with different views. We necessarily don't like to actually talk or listen to people who have differing opinions. And whenever we do this kind of thing, we actually deter ourselves from experimenting with other ideas. We, as human beings, stop our own growth when we actually stop interacting with those other people who do not think the way that we do, instead of having a conversation with them, instead of actually getting a couple of chairs, sitting down and talking about the different changes that we want to make in our lives and each other's lives and in the lives of our social culture as a large. We tend to deter ourselves and each other from making any real progress as human beings because of this. And that's probably the biggest point that I really want to end on there, is that whenever people fear change, the concept of change, the idea of it, because it's something that's constantly going on, whether we realize it or not, it limits our interactions with other human beings, especially the ones that don't agree with us, especially the ones that don't see the way that we do, they don't understand things the way that we do, and we don't give them the time of day to explain to us why they think that way, what they're thinking, or how they got to that conclusion. And it's dividing the entire planet. It's not just dividing individuals, it's dividing the entire planet, not just certain groups of people, just everybody all over the place. And it's probably the primary cause of everyone's fear of the idea of change. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little short, but we will dive even deeper a little bit later into how change can actually impact the individuals on a more in-depth way, rather than just keeping it kind of surface level like we have here. Anyway, share this with your friends, your family, let your grandmother know about it, talk about it with your friends, family. Remember, change is a wonderful subject to discuss because it is something that is always happening. Have you guys a fantastic Saturday, and I will talk to you guys again later. Bye, guys.